Hi, I'm Natalie. 3 months ago, my family cornered me at Sunday dinner and demanded I fund their dream vacation to Maui, $15,000 for a luxury resort, first-class flights and spa treatments. When I hesitated, my sister Cassandra laughed and said, "Come on, Nat, it's not like you have anything better to spend your money on. You're still single, no kids, living in that tiny apartment. Think of it as your contribution to family memories." What they didn't realize was that I had the power to make those flights disappear with a single phone call. And I did. But the real cancellation wasn't their vacation. It was my willingness to be their personal ATM. Ever been used so completely that you almost convinced yourself it was love? Keep watching. Because what happened when they arrived at the airport still makes my hands shake with satisfaction. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn rain in Portland had a way of making everything feel heavy, including the conversations that happened behind closed doors. I pulled my jacket tighter as I walked up the familiar stone pathway to my childhood home in Beaverton, the same house where I'd learned that being the youngest meant being the most convenient. The windows glowed warm against the October evening, casting golden rectangles across the wet grass. Inside, I could already hear Cassandra's laugh, sharp and confident, the kind that had always made me feel like I was missing the punchline to a joke told at my expense. I'd been avoiding these Sunday dinners for weeks, but Mom had called 3 times this week with that special tone she reserved for guilt trips. "Natalie, honey, we're family." Family shows up for each other. The irony wasn't lost on me that showing up for family seemed to involve my wallet more often than my presence. I checked my phone before ringing the doorbell. A text from my colleague, Isabella, lit up the screen. "Remember what we discussed. You don't owe them anything just because you share DNA." I tucked the phone away and pressed the bell. Dad answered with his usual distracted smile, already turning back toward the living room before I'd fully stepped inside. "Nat's here," he called out, as if announcing the arrival of the pizza delivery rather than his daughter. The house smelled like Mom's pot roast and the expensive candles Cassandra always brought to make herself look thoughtful. Tyler appeared from the kitchen, beer in hand, his real estate agent's smile plastered on like he was about to pitch me a timeshare. "There she is," he said, wrapping me in a one-armed hug that felt more like a business greeting. "Perfect timing. We were just talking about you." That phrase had never led to anything good in this house. I followed him into the dining room where Mom was setting out the good china, the set that only appeared when Cassandra was visiting, or when they needed something from me. The table looked like a magazine spread, complete with fresh flowers and linen napkins folded into perfect triangles. Cassandra rose from her chair with the grace of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. Her auburn hair was styled in loose waves that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and her smile had that practiced warmth she'd perfected during her years in marketing. "Natalie, you look tired, sweetie. Are you getting enough sleep?" The concern was performed, not felt, but everyone else at the table nodded along as if she'd just demonstrated genuine sisterly care. We settled into our usual spots around the oval dining table, the same seats we'd occupied for decades. Cassandra to Mom's right, Tyler across from her, Dad at the head, looking vaguely uncomfortable, and me in the chair closest to the kitchen, always ready to hop up and help serve or clear. Old patterns die hard, even when you can afford to eat at restaurants nicer than this every night of the week. The conversation flowed through its predictable channels. Tyler's latest real estate deals, Cassandra's promotion at the marketing firm, Mom's book club drama, Dad's golf score. I contributed when prompted, sharing carefully edited updates about work that made my job sound routine rather than remarkable. They didn't need to know about the luxury travel concierge business I'd built, the VIP clients I managed, or the industry connections that opened doors most people couldn't even find. "So," Mom said, her fork pausing midway to her mouth, "Cassandra has some exciting news to share." The spotlight shifted to my sister, who straightened in her chair with the confidence of someone about to announce a royal engagement. Tyler leaned forward expectantly, and Dad actually looked up from his plate for the first time since grade. "Well," Cassandra began, her voice taking on that presentation tone she used at work, "James and I have been talking, and we've decided it's time for a real family vacation. Not just a weekend at the coast, but something special. Something we'll remember forever." She paused for effect, letting the anticipation build. "We want to take the whole family to Maui, 10 days at the Grand Palms Resort, first-class flights, ocean view suites, the works." Mom clasped her hands together like she'd just witnessed a miracle. "Oh, Cassandra, that sounds absolutely wonderful. When were you thinking?" Tyler was already nodding enthusiastically, probably calculating how many Instagram posts he could generate from a luxury Hawaiian vacation. Dad looked pleased but uncertain, the way he always did when money conversations started. "February," Cassandra continued, pulling out her phone to show professionally shot photos of the resort. "It's the perfect time to escape this dreary Portland weather. White sand beaches, world-class spa, 5-star dining." James has already looked into the details. "The whole package would be about $15,000, she said the number casually, as if discussing the cost of groceries rather than what most people earned in several months. The table went quiet, except for the sound of rain pattering against the dining room windows. Dad cleared his throat, and Mom's smile flickered slightly. Tyler took a long drink of his beer, suddenly very interested in the label. I knew what was coming before anyone spoke. This wasn't an announcement of their generous gift to the family. This was the setup for an ask. "Now obviously," Cassandra said, her tone shifting to that reasonable, let's all be adults register, "we'd need everyone to contribute their fair share. Mom and Dad, Tyler and Madison, me and James," and her eyes landed on me with laser precision. "Natalie." The way she said my name made it clear this wasn't really a discussion about equal contributions. This was about who had the deepest pockets and the weakest boundary. "What kind of contribution are we talking about?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer would be inversely proportional to each person's ability to say no. Cassandra's smile brightened, sensing weakness in my question rather than the skepticism I'd intended. "Well, let's be realistic about everyone's situations," she said, her voice taking on that patronizing tone I remembered from childhood arguments. "Mom and Dad are on a fixed income. Tyler and Madison just bought their house and we all know how expensive that was. James and I have been saving, but my promotion means we're in a higher tax bracket now, which is actually costing us more than you'd think." She paused to let the mathematics of their various hardships sink in. "You, on the other hand, are single, no kids, no mortgage, no major expense. You're probably saving money every month without even trying." The assumption stung because they revealed how little my family actually knew about my life. They saw my modest apartment and second-hand car, and assumed I was barely scraping by, rather than recognizing these as choices made by someone who valued experiences over possession. They had no idea about the investment portfolio I'd built, the travel industry partnerships that let me see the world at a fraction of the usual cost, or the client bonuses that sometimes exceeded their annual salaries. "So what exactly are you asking me to contribute?" I pressed, though the knot in my stomach already knew the answer. Cassandra exchanged a look with Tyler, one of those silent sibling communications that had always made me feel like an outsider in my own family. "The thing is," Tyler jumped in, his real estate agent negotiation skills kicking in, "when you break it down, it's really not that much per person. If we divide it evenly among the adults, that's only about $2,500 each. But given everyone's circumstance," he trailed off, leaving the implication hanging in the air like smoke from a campfire. "We were thinking," Mom said gently, her voice carrying that special maternal guilt that had worked so effectively throughout my childhood, "that maybe you could cover a bit more, just temporarily. Everyone would pay you back once they get their finances sorted out. It would be like a family loan." Cassandra nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. And honestly, Nat, think about what this could mean for our family. Real quality time together, away from all the stress and distraction. When's the last time we all took a vacation together? When's the last time we had 10 uninterrupted days to just enjoy each other's company?" Her voice took on a dreamy quality, as if she was describing a scene from a holiday movie rather than proposing, "I fund their luxury getaway." "And the memories," Mom added, her eyes actually misting slightly. The photos, the stories we'll tell for years. You can't put a price on that kind of family bonding. The emotional manipulation was so thick I could practically taste it, but I could see it was working on Dad, whose expression was softening by the minute. Plus, Tyler added, sensing an opening, think about the networking opportunities. The Grand Palms attracts a really upscale clientele. You never know who you might meet, what connections you might make. It could be great for your career. The irony of him suggesting I needed help with my career, while asking me to fund their vacation, wasn't lost on me, but I kept my expression neutral. So how much, exactly, are we talking about? I asked, my voice steady despite the frustration building in my chest. The table went quiet again, and I could feel everyone holding their breath. Cassandra looked at Tyler, Tyler looked at Mom, and Mom looked at Dad. It was like watching a game of hot potato with a grenade. Finally, Cassandra took a deep breath and met my eyes. We were hoping you could cover about 8,000. I know it sounds like a lot, but when you think about it as an investment in family relationships, in memories that will last a lifetime. She let the sentence hang there, waiting for my response. $8,000, more than half the total cost of their dream vacation. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, not shock at the amount, but at the casual way they decided I should subsidize their luxury while they all had excuses for why they couldn't contribute equally. The worst part was how they'd dressed it up as a family investment, as if my money was buying me a seat at a table where I'd always been welcome. That's a significant amount, I said carefully, watching their faces for any sign of awareness about what they were asking. I'd need to think about it, look at my finances, see what's possible. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did need to think, just not about whether I could afford it. I needed to think about whether I wanted to continue enabling this pattern of taking that had defined our family dynamic for years. Of course, Mom said quickly, relief evident in her voice. We're not asking for an answer right now. Take your time. Do your math. But if you could let us know soon, that would be helpful. The resort books up quickly, and the flight prices are only going to go up the closer we get to February. Cassandra pulled out a folder that had clearly been prepared in advance. I put together some information about the resort, the flight options, all the details. You can take this home and look everything over. And she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, her grip just a little too tight to be purely affectionate. I really think this could be exactly what our family needs. A chance to reconnect, to make new memories together. Don't you want that? The question was loaded with implication. If I said no, I'd be the one refusing to invest in family relationships. If I hesitated too long, I'd be the one holding up everyone's happiness. If I asked too many questions, I'd be the one being difficult and suspicious. It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation, and I had to admire the strategy even as it made me feel sick. I took the folder, its weight somehow heavier than the papers inside warranted. I'll look this over and get back to you, I said, standing to help clear the table. The conversation moved on to other topics, but I could feel the undercurrent of expectation humming beneath every exchange. They'd made their ask, planted their seeds of guilt and obligation, and now they were waiting for those seeds to grow into the answer they want. As I loaded the dishwasher, I listened to them plan activities for their hypothetical vacation: snorkeling excursions, spa days, sunset dinners on the beach. They talked about it with the confidence of people who'd already decided the money would materialize, probably because in their experience, it always had. When I needed school supplies, I'd earned money babysitting. When Cassandra needed a car, Dad had co-signed a loan. When Tyler wanted to study abroad, the family had pooled resources to make it happen. The pattern was clear. My needs were my responsibility, but their wants were family investment. I hugged everyone goodbye with the same forced warmth I'd been practicing for years, promised to review the vacation materials, and drove home through the Portland drizzle with my mind spinning. My apartment felt like a sanctuary after the emotional minefield of dinner, its clean lines and carefully chosen furniture reflecting a life built on my own terms rather than inherited expectation. I spread Cassandra's vacation research across my kitchen table and actually read through it, though not for the reasons they expect. The Grand Palms was indeed a luxury property, the kind of place I'd booked for clients who thought nothing of spending $15,000 on a weekend getaway. The irony wasn't lost on me that I probably knew more about this resort than Cassandra did, had likely negotiated better rates for strangers than my own family was getting. My phone buzzed with a text from Isabella. "How did dinner go? Did they ask for money yet?" I smiled despite myself. My colleague knew my family dynamics better than my family knew my career. I typed back, 15,000 for a Maui vacation. They want 8 from me. The response came immediately. "Are you kidding me? Nat, you literally planned that exact trip for the Morrison family last month. You could book the same resort for half what they're paying." She was right. Of course, the travel industry was built on relationships and insider knowledge, both of which I'd cultivated carefully over the past 5 years at Wanderlust Elite. What looked like an impossibly expensive dream vacation to my family was actually a fairly standard booking in my world. The difference was that my clients understood the value of expertise and were willing to pay for access to exclusive rates and upgrades. I walked to my bedroom and opened the closet, pushing aside the modest clothes I wore to family dinners to reveal the professional wardrobe hidden behind them. Tailored blazers, designer shoes, the kind of pieces that commanded respect in high-end hospitality settings. This was the version of myself my family had never seen, the one who negotiated million-dollar travel packages and maintained relationships with resort owners across the Pacific. Tomorrow I'd have to make a decision about their request, but tonight I allowed myself to imagine a different scenario. What if, instead of writing them a check, I offered them something more valuable? What if I used my industry connections to give them a vacation they'd never forget, just not in the way they expect? The idea was dangerous and appealing in equal measure, the kind of plan that could either heal our relationship or destroy it completely. I fell asleep that night thinking about plane tickets and cancellation policies, about the difference between being generous and being used. Somewhere in the space between dreaming and waking, a plan began to form. It would require careful timing, precise execution, and a willingness to burn bridges I'd been tiptoeing across for years. But as I drifted off, I realized I was tired of being careful. Sometimes the only way to teach people about consequences was to let them experience them firsthand. The next morning brought clarity along with the November rain. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I knew what I was going to do, and for the first time in years, the prospect of a family gathering filled me with anticipation rather than dread. They wanted a vacation they'd never forget. I was going to make sure they got exactly that. Monday morning at Wanderlust Elite Travel Concierge arrived with its usual symphony of ringing phones and clicking keyboards. The downtown Portland office occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse, its floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the Willamette River and the snow-capped peaks beyond. I settled into my ergonomic chair, the Italian leather a far cry from the hand-me-down furniture my family imagined I owned, and powered up my computer system. The dual monitors flickered to life, displaying a dashboard that would have made most travel agents weep with envy. Real-time inventory feeds from luxury resorts worldwide, direct booking portals with hotels that didn't even advertise to the general public, and a contact database worth more than most people's retirement accounts. This wasn't the world of Expedia and Priceline that most travelers knew. This was the invisible network that moved celebrities, executives, and old money families around the globe, with the discretion of Swiss bankers and the efficiency of Swiss watches. Marcus Chen appeared at my cubicle entrance carrying his usual morning espresso, his silver hair perfectly styled despite the early hour. As the founder of Wanderlust Elite, he'd built the company from a single office operation into the Pacific Northwest's premier luxury travel concierge service. More importantly for my current situation, he'd taken me under his wing 3 years ago, when I'd proven I could handle the most demanding clients without breaking a sweat. "Morning, Natalie," he said, settling into the chair beside my desk. "I just got off the phone with the Nakamura family. They want to extend their Bora Bora stay by another week, but they're requesting the overwater villa that's supposedly booked solid through March." He raised an eyebrow, the expression of someone who'd learned that impossible was simply a starting point for negotiation. I pulled up the resort's private portal, fingers dancing across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. The Nakamuras always stay in Villa 7 when they're at the Four Seasons. Let me see what I can do. 3 phone calls later, including one to a resort manager who owed me a favor from last year's celebrity wedding crisis, I'd secured the villa transfer. The supposedly impossible booking had taken less than 20 minutes to arrange. Excellent work, as always, Marcus said, making a note in his leather portfolio. Speaking of excellent work, I have something I wanted to discuss with you. The Morrison account specifically requested you for their anniversary planning. They're talking about a 3-week Mediterranean yacht charter, budget essentially unlimited. They want to start planning next week. The Morrison account. I'd handled their son's destination wedding in Tuscany, their daughter's graduation trip to Japan, and their silver anniversary celebration in New Zealand. They trusted me with itineraries worth more than some people's houses, and they paid premium rates for the privilege. The commission alone from their Mediterranean charter would cover my rent for the rest of the year. I'd be honored to work with them again, I said, though my mind was already spinning with the implication. The Morrisons knew me as someone who could make the impossible happen, who had contacts in every major city and resort destination worldwide. They'd never questioned my ability to secure reservations at restaurants with 6-month waiting lists or suites at hotels that claimed to be fully booked. To them, I wasn't just a travel agent. I was a miracle worker. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me with the expression of someone who'd built a business on reading people. You know, Natalie, I've been thinking it's time we discussed your future here. You've exceeded every performance metric for 3 consecutive years. Your client retention rate is 97%, which is unheard of in this industry. Your revenue generation last quarter alone exceeded what most of our competitors do in a full year. The conversation was heading somewhere significant. I could feel it. Marcus didn't engage in casual flattery, and he certainly didn't waste time on performance reviews that could be handled by email. I appreciate the feedback, I said carefully, sensing there was more coming. What I'm getting at, he continued, is that I think you're ready for the next level. Senior account executive, your own office, a seat on the executive committee, more importantly, access to our platinum tier partnership, the kind of connections that can make or break travel plans with a single phone call. He paused, letting the weight of the offer settle. The kind of connections that could, for instance, ground every flight to Hawaii for mechanical inspections if the right person made the right call. My heart skipped a beat. Marcus knew, somehow he'd picked up on the family drama that I'd been so careful to keep separate from work. Either that, or his comment about grounding Hawaii flights was the most coincidental example he could have chosen. I kept my expression neutral, though inside I felt like a poker player who'd just been dealt a royal flush. That's an interesting example, I said lightly, testing the waters. Hypothetically speaking, of course, what kind of situations would warrant that level of intervention? Marcus smiled, the expression of someone who'd just confirmed a suspicion. Oh, you'd be surprised what kinds of requests we get from our most valued clients, he said, his tone casual but his eyes sharp. Family disputes, business negotiations gone wrong, romantic entanglements that need to be discouraged with strategic flight delays. The luxury travel industry operates on relationships and favors. Natalie, when you control access to experiences that money alone can't buy, you wield a very particular kind of power. The promotion offer was real, but it was also a mess. Marcus was telling me that if I accepted the senior position, I'd have access to the kind of industry influence that could turn travel plans into weapons. The timing felt too convenient to be coincidental, which meant either Marcus was more perceptive than I'd realized, or Isabella had been talking to people she shouldn't have been talking to. The position sounds incredibly appealing, I said, choosing my words carefully. When would you need an answer? Marcus stood smoothing his Italian wool suit jacket with the casual precision of someone who'd never owned anything off the rack. Take your time, he said, though I should mention, the Patel family just called about booking their annual group trip to Maui. 27 family members, They want the Grand Palms Resort for 10 days in February. They're offering to pay premium rates for exclusive access to the spa and restaurants. He paused at my cubicle entrance, his back to me. Shame if something were to interfere with their plan. All those deposits, all that coordination. Hotel policy on large group cancellations can be quite unforgiving. After Marcus disappeared into his corner office, I sat staring at my computer screen without really seeing it. The Patel family booking he'd mentioned was almost certainly fictional, a creative way of telling me that the Grand Palms Resort was well within the sphere of influence that came with my potential promotion. He was offering me the keys to the kingdom, and we both knew exactly why I might need them. Isabella appeared at my desk during the lunch hour, her designer handbag slung over her shoulder and her expression carefully neutral. "Coffee run," she announced, though we both knew the building's espresso machine was perfectly adequate. "Want to join?" I grabbed my jacket and followed her out, understanding that some conversations required distance from corporate walls and potential eavesdroppers. The coffee shop 3 blocks away catered to the downtown business crowd, its exposed brick walls and industrial lighting designed to suggest authenticity while charging premium prices. We claimed a corner table, the kind of spot where corporate secrets and office gossip had been exchanged for decades. Isabella waited until we'd both ordered before leaning forward with the intensity of someone about to share classified information. "Marcus knows about your family situation," she said without preamble. "I didn't tell him, but someone did. My guess is he has sources at the Grand Palms. The luxury travel industry is smaller than people think, and resort managers talk to each other constantly." She stirred her latte with mechanical precision, her eyes scanning the room for potential listeners. "How much does he know?" I asked, though I suspected the answer would be more comprehensive than I'd prefer. Isabella had been my closest friend at the company for 2 years, the only person who'd seen through my modest apartment and second-hand car to understand that I was building something larger than appearances suggested. "He knows your family booked a group package to Maui for February. He knows you're being pressured to fund most of it yourself, and he knows you have the skills and connections to make their travel experience either magical or catastrophic." She leaned back in her chair, studying my face. "The question is, what are you planning to do with that information?" The honest answer was that I wasn't entirely sure yet. The previous night's half-formed plan had crystallized into something more concrete during Marcus's office visit, but the details remained fluid. I knew I wanted my family to understand the consequences of treating me like their personal bank account. I knew I wanted them to experience what it felt like to have their assumptions proven wrong in the most public way possible. Beyond that, I was still improvising. "I'm considering my options," I said carefully. "The promotion Marcus offered would give me access to resources that could be very useful for evening the playing field." Isabella nodded, her expression suggesting she'd expected as much. "There's something else you should know," she continued. "The Grand Palms Resort is owned by Pacific Hospitality Group. Marcus sits on their advisory board, which means he has direct access to their executive staff. If you wanted to, say, ensure that a particular booking experienced complications, he could make that happen with a single phone call." The implications were staggering. What I'd been imagining as a complex scheme involving multiple favors and careful timing could potentially be executed with the efficiency of corporate policy. Marcus wasn't just offering me a promotion, he was offering me the chance to teach my family a lesson they'd never forget, backed by the full resources of a luxury travel empire. "Why would he get involved in my personal family drama?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer. Isabella smiled, the expression of someone about to reveal the final piece of a puzzle. "Because you're not the only high-performing employee who's dealt with family members who think the travel industry is just making vacation suggestions and collecting commissions," she said. "Marcus built this company by understanding that our clients' problems become our problems and our employees' problems become company problems. He's not getting involved in your family drama. He's protecting a valuable asset by giving you the tools to resolve a distraction." The coffee shop suddenly felt smaller, as if the conversation had shifted the air pressure around our table. I was being offered something that went beyond career advancement, beyond even personal revenge. I was being offered membership in a network that operated by different rules than the ordinary world, where loyalty was rewarded with access to power that most people couldn't even imagine. What would acceptance of the promotion actually involve? I asked. Isabella pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot of an email, the sender's address showing Marcus's personal account rather than the company domain. Senior account executive comes with a corner office, a 60% salary increase, and access to the Platinum Partnership database, she read. That database includes direct contact information for hotel owners, airline executives, and resort managers across 6 continents. It also includes leverage files, which document favors owed, personal relationships, and pressure points that can be used to secure impossible bookings or resolve complex situations. Leverage files. The phrase made my pulse quicken with a combination of excitement and apprehension. Marcus wasn't just offering me a promotion, he was offering me admission to a shadow network that operated parallel to the official travel industry, where personal relationships and strategic information could move mountains or ground airplanes with equal efficiency. There's a catch, of course, Isabella continued. Platinum-level access comes with platinum-level discretion requirements. What happens in the database stays in the database. Favors called in are never discussed outside the company, and personal use of company resources requires prior approval from Marcus himself. She put her phone away and leaned forward again. The good news is that he's already indicated his approval for your particular situation. We finished our coffee in relative silence, both of us understanding that the conversation had crossed a line from workplace gossip into something approaching conspiracy. When we returned to the office, I found a sealed envelope on my desk, my name written in Marcus's distinctive handwriting. Inside was a single key card and a note. Conference Room A, 4 p.m., come alone. Conference Room A was the executive boardroom, a space I'd only seen during company-wide meetings and client presentations involving 8-figure travel budgets. The walls were lined with photographs of exotic destinations and satisfied clients, a visual reminder of the experiences that Wanderlust Elite made possible for those who could afford them. Marcus was waiting when I arrived, along with a woman I didn't recognize. Natalie, I'd like you to meet Caroline Zhang, Marcus said, gesturing to the elegantly dressed Asian woman, seated at the far end of the conference table. Caroline is the Pacific Regional Director for Platinum Hospitality Group, which owns and operates 17 luxury resorts across Hawaii, including the Grand Palms. Caroline stood and extended her hand with the confidence of someone accustomed to high-stakes introductions. Brooks, she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that suggested expensive international education. Marcus has told me quite a bit about your work with our mutual clients. The Nakamura family speaks very highly of your attention to detail and discretion. The praise felt genuine, but there was an undercurrent of assessment in her tone, as if she was evaluating me for something beyond my professional qualifications. Please, sit, Marcus said, taking his place at the head of the table. Caroline and I have been discussing a situation that's developed at the Grand Palms, a large group booking that's creating some complications for other guests, specifically a family group that may not be entirely suitable for the resort's current clientele profile. I felt my heart rate accelerate as the conversation's direction became clear. Caroline opened a leather portfolio and spread several documents across the polished table surface: resort booking confirmations, payment records, and what appeared to be background information on my family members. The efficiency was both impressive and terrifying. The Brooks family booking, Caroline said, her tone professionally neutral. 10 days in February, 5 suites, premium package, including spa access and dining privileges. The booking was made through a third-party agency, which means they're paying approximately 40% more than our preferred partner rates. She looked up from the documents, her expression carefully blank. Unfortunately, we've recently implemented new policies regarding group bookings made through unauthorized channels. The setup was elegant in its simplicity. Caroline was offering to cancel my family's reservation on technical grounds, making it appear as if they'd been victims of booking agency incompetence, rather than deliberate sabotage. No fingerprints, no personal vendettas, just the cold efficiency of corporate policy enforcement. What kind of policies? I asked, though I was increasingly certain I knew where this was heading. Marcus and Caroline exchanged a look that suggested they'd rehearsed this conversation, or at least anticipated my question. Effective immediately, all group bookings exceeding 4 rooms must be coordinated through our Platinum Partnership Program, Caroline explained. This ensures proper vetting of group composition, coordination of resort activities, and maintenance of our exclusive atmosphere standard. She paused, allowing the implications to settle. Groups that fail to meet these standards face immediate cancellation, with refunds subject to our standard policy terms. Standard policy term. I'd read enough travel industry fine print to understand that phrase was code for "you'll be lucky to see half your money back, and it'll take 6 months to process." My family would lose thousands of dollars and their dream vacation simultaneously, all because they'd failed to understand that the travel industry operated by rules they'd never bothered to learn. Of course, Marcus added, exceptions can be made for groups sponsored by Platinum Partnership members. Senior account executives automatically qualify for such sponsorship privileges, assuming they're willing to take personal responsibility for their sponsored group's behavior and satisfaction. The offer was breathtaking in its completeness. Accept the promotion, and I could save my family's vacation while simultaneously demonstrating the kind of power they'd never imagined I possessed. Decline the promotion, and watch them lose their deposits and their plans through no apparent fault of mine. Either way, they'd learn that their assumptions about my capabilities had been dangerously incomplete. I'd need to understand the full scope of sponsorship responsibilities, I said, buying time to process the implications. Caroline smiled, the expression of someone who'd anticipated the question and prepared a comprehensive answer. Sponsorship is quite straightforward, she said. The sponsor takes personal responsibility for ensuring their group understands and follows resort policies. They coordinate all special requests, handle any disputes or complaints, and serve as the primary point of contact for resort management. She paused, her smile becoming sharper. They also have the authority to modify group arrangements as needed, including room assignments, activity reservations, and even individual group member access to resort facilities. Individual group member access. The phrase hung in the air like a threat wrapped in silk. Caroline was telling me that as a sponsor I could control every aspect of my family's vacation experience, from where they slept to what restaurants they could access. I would become the puppet master of their Hawaiian dreams, with the power to make their stay either paradise or purgatory with a few keystrokes. The position comes with significant benefits beyond vacation sponsorship. Marcus access to the Platinum database, executive-level client assignments, and profit-sharing arrangements that typically double our senior executives' annual income within the first year. He slid a contract across the table, its length and complexity suggesting this was far more than a simple promotion agreement. I picked up the document, scanning the legal language that formalized everything they'd been discussing: employment terms, compensation packages, confidentiality agreements, and buried in the middle, a clause about personal use of company resources for relationship management and conflict resolution purposes. They'd even ensured that using my new position to manipulate my family's vacation would be explicitly covered under company policy. When would you need a decision? I asked, though I was beginning to understand that in some ways, the decision had already been made the moment I'd walked into conference room A. Marcus and Caroline had invested too much time and preparation in this offer for it to be casual. They expected acceptance, and they'd structured the conversation to make refusal seem both foolish and impossible. The Grand Palms booking deadline for February is next Friday. Caroline said, after that, we release uncommitted inventory to our preferred partners, and availability becomes much more limited. She gathered her documents with the precision of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations. Of course, if you decide to accept the promotion before then, we could arrange to hold your family's reservations while you determine the most appropriate way to handle their travel arrangements. After Caroline left, Marcus and I sat alone in the conference room, the weight of unspoken possibilities filling the space between us. The contract lay on the table like a loaded weapon, its innocuous legal language concealing the power to reshape my relationship with my family permanently. You know, Marcus said, his tone conversational, I've been in this business for 25 years. I've seen families torn apart by money and brought together by shared experiences. The difference usually comes down to who controls the experience and how they choose to use that control. He stood and walked to the window, his silhouette framed against the Portland skyline. Your family has been taking advantage of your generosity for years, assuming you'd always say yes because you always have. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for people is show them the consequences of their assumptions. The wisdom felt both profound and dangerous, like advice from someone who'd learned to justify significant actions through careful philosophical reasoning. Marcus wasn't encouraging me to pursue revenge. He was framing my potential actions as education, as a form of tough love that would ultimately benefit everyone involved. Think about it over the weekend, he said, returning to the table to gather his things. But remember, opportunities like this don't come along often. The chance to take control of your own narrative, to show your family who you really are, instead of who they've decided you should be. That's worth more than any salary increase or job title. I left the office that evening with the contract in my briefcase and a decision crystallizing in my mind. For years I'd hidden my success behind modest clothes and humble apartments, protecting my family's feelings at the expense of my own recognition. I'd let them underestimate me because it seemed easier than challenging their assumptions, safer than risking their resentment of my achievements. But safety, I was beginning to understand, was just another form of prison. And I was tired of being the only one locked inside. The weekend passed in a blur of careful planning and sleepless nights. By Monday morning, I'd signed the contract and returned it to Marcus, along with a detailed strategy for what I was calling Operation Reality Check. The promotion took effect immediately, complete with my new corner office and access to the platinum database that Caroline had promised. The leather-bound directory contained contact information for resort owners, airline executives, and hospitality managers across the globe, along with detailed notes about favors owed, personal relationships, and strategic pressure points. My first official act as senior account executive was to call my family and accept their vacation funding request. Cassandra's voice practically vibrated with satisfaction when I told her I could contribute the $8,000 they'd requested. Maybe even a bit more to ensure they got the best possible experience. Oh, Natalie, this is wonderful, she gushed. I knew you'd come through for the family. This is going to be such an amazing bonding experience for all of us. The irony in her words was almost painful. She was right about the bonding experience, just not in the way she imagined. I arranged to meet them at their favorite restaurant in the Pearl District that evening to discuss the payment details and finalize their travel arrangement. What they didn't know was that I'd already been in contact with Caroline Zhang about implementing some creative modifications to their booking. The restaurant buzzed with the usual Monday night energy, young professionals celebrating deals and older couples enjoying intimate dinners under warm Edison bulb lighting. I arrived early and claimed a corner table with a clear view of the entrance, wanting to see my family's faces as they walked in. This would be the last time they saw me as the financially struggling younger sister who could be manipulated with guilt and obligation. Cassandra arrived first, her confidence evident in the way she navigated through the crowded restaurant like she owned the place. She'd dressed for celebration, wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than most people's monthly car payments, and carrying a handbag that screamed designer status. Tyler followed close behind, his real estate agent's smile already in place as he spotted me at the table. "There's our hero," Tyler announced, loud enough for neighboring tables to overhear. "The sister who's making our dream vacation possible." He leaned down to give me an awkward hug that felt more like a performance than genuine affection. Cassandra slid into the seat across from me, her eyes bright with anticipation. "So," she said, pulling out a leather portfolio that looked suspiciously similar to the one Caroline had used during our meeting. I've been doing some additional research on the resort, and I think we can upgrade a few elements of the trip without going too far over budget. Maybe oceanfront suites instead of garden view. Perhaps some premium spa packages. She opened the portfolio to reveal printed pages of resort amenities and pricing options. Mom and Dad arrived together, their faces showing a mixture of excitement and lingering guilt about accepting money from their youngest daughter. Dad especially looked uncomfortable, fidgeting with his tie and avoiding direct eye contact. "Natalie, sweetheart," Mom said, settling into her chair with the careful movements of someone trying to project gratitude without acknowledging the underlying power imbalance. "We can't tell you how much this means to the family. When's the last time we all did something like this together?" "Not since I graduated high school," I replied, the memory still sharp after 10 years. They'd taken a family trip to celebrate Cassandra's college graduation, but when my turn came, Dad had been between jobs and money was tight. I'd understood then, just as I understood now, that their financial priorities had always reflected their emotional ones. The server appeared to take drink orders, and I waited until everyone had settled in before pulling out my own folder. "Before we get too far into planning upgrades," I said, my voice calm and professional, "there are a few things we need to discuss about the booking process. It turns out there have been some changes in how luxury resorts handle group reservations." Cassandra's smile flickered slightly, sensing a shift in the conversation's direction. "What kind of changes?" she asked, her marketing instincts alerting her to potential complications. Tyler leaned forward, his negotiation training kicking in as he prepared to handle whatever obstacle had emerged. "Well," I continued, opening my folder to reveal the contract I'd prepared, "it seems that the Grand Palms Resort has implemented new policies for group booking. All reservations exceeding 4 rooms need to be coordinated through their Platinum Partnership program, which requires a qualified sponsor to take responsibility for the group's experience and behavior." The table went quiet as they processed this information. Dad cleared his throat and Mom looked confused. "What does that mean exactly?" Mom asked, her voice carrying the careful tone of someone navigating unfamiliar territory. "It means," I explained, my tone remaining professionally neutral, "that someone needs to serve as the primary contact with the resort, coordinate all activities and special requests, and essentially act as the group leader for the duration of the stay." I paused, letting the implications settle. "The good news is that I'm qualified to serve as your sponsor." Cassandra's eyes narrowed slightly, as she began to sense that this conversation wasn't heading where she'd expected. "You're qualified? How exactly are you qualified to sponsor a luxury resort book?" Her tone carried just enough skepticism to remind everyone at the table that she'd always viewed me as the least capable member of the family. I reached into my briefcase and placed my new business cards on the table, the embossed letters spelling out, "Senior Account Executive, Wanderlust Elite Travel Concierge" in elegant serif font. The cards were made from thick cotton paper with metallic accents, the kind of premium business cards that suggested serious professional credentials. "I've recently been promoted," I said simply, watching their faces as they picked up the cards and examined. "Wanderlust Elite specializes in luxury travel coordination for high-net-worth clients. We maintain partnerships with premium resorts worldwide, including the Grand Palms." The understatement was deliberate. Let them think I'd stumbled into a junior position at a travel agency rather than revealing the full scope of my industry influence. Tyler was the first to speak, his real estate background helping him recognize quality when he saw it. "This is a very nice card," he said, running his finger along the embossed edges. "How long have you been working there?" The question carried an undertone of surprise, as if he couldn't quite reconcile the sister he'd known with someone who might have professional accomplishments worth hiding. "About 5 years," I replied, which was technically true, though it omitted the rapid promotions and industry recognition I'd earned along the way. I started in customer service and worked my way up. The promotion came with some additional benefits, including the ability to sponsor family bookings at partner resorts. Cassandra set down her business card and leaned back in her chair, her expression shifting from confusion to calculation. "So you're saying you can get us some kind of discount or upgrade through your company connections?" The assumption was typical Cassandra, immediately focused on what advantage she could extract from the situation, rather than acknowledging that I might have professional expertise worth respecting. "Something like that," I said, pulling out the modified booking confirmation that Caroline had prepared. As your sponsor, I'll be able to coordinate your entire stay, from airport transfers to restaurant reservation. The resort will handle all requests through me, which should ensure a much more streamlined experience. I slid the document across the table, watching as they scanned the details. The booking confirmation looked identical to what they'd expected, with one crucial difference. Instead of listing Cassandra as the primary contact, my name appeared as the designated sponsor and account manager. Every activity, every meal, every spa appointment would require my approval. I would control their access to resort amenities, with the efficiency of a corporate security system. This looks great, Mom said, relief evident in her voice. It's so nice to have someone in the family who knows how these things work. The compliment felt genuine, though it carried the unintentional sting of suggesting that competence from me was unexpected rather than overdue. Dad was studying the financial breakdown with the attention of someone who'd spent decades managing small business budgets. The total amount here is different from what Cassandra originally calculated, he said, looking up with a puzzled expression. It's actually lower. How is that possible? I'd been waiting for this question. Partner rates, I explained. Luxury resorts offer significant discounts to travel industry professionals, especially for family bookings that can serve as references for future clients. The $8,000 I'm contributing will actually cover about 60% of the total cost instead of the 50% we originally discussed. The mathematics were deliberately confusing, designed to make them focus on the savings rather than questioning the underlying power structure I was establishing. In reality, the resort rates I'd negotiated through Caroline were so favorable that my $8,000 contribution would cover nearly the entire cost of their vacation. They'd be staying at one of Hawaii's most exclusive resorts, essentially as my guests, though they didn't need to know that yet. So what exactly does this sponsorship arrangement involve? Cassandra asked, her legal marketing background making her more suspicious of fine print than the rest of the family. Are there restrictions or requirements we need to know about? The question showed she was beginning to sense that something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic, even if she couldn't yet identify what. I opened my portfolio to reveal a printed copy of the resort's guest policies, the same document that Caroline had shown me during our meeting. Standard luxury resort guidelines, I said, sliding the pages across the table. Dress codes for restaurants, spa reservation protocols, activity booking procedures. The main difference is that all requests go through me as your sponsor rather than being handled individually. Tyler scanned the policies with the quick efficiency of someone accustomed to reading contracts. These seem pretty reasonable, he said. Basically just saying we need to follow resort rules and coordinate through you for special arrangements. He looked up with a grin. Honestly, it sounds like you're doing all the work while we get to relax and enjoy ourselves. If only he knew how accurate that assessment would prove to be. I was indeed going to be doing all the work, just not in the way he imagined. Every restaurant reservation, every spa appointment, every activity booking would be carefully orchestrated to ensure my family experienced exactly the vacation they deserved. There is one additional element we should discuss, I said, pulling out the final document in my folder. Resort insurance and emergency contact protocols. Since I'm serving as your sponsor, I'll also be designated as the primary emergency contact and decision maker for any situations that might arise during your stay. The language was borrowed from corporate travel policies, designed to sound routine while establishing broad authority over their resort experience. If flight delays occurred, I would make rebooking decisions. If health issues arose, I would coordinate medical care. If disputes with resort staff developed, I would handle resolution. They were essentially signing over control of their vacation to someone they'd never recognized as an adult capable of managing her own life. Mom signed first, her signature flowing across the bottom of the page with the trusting penmanship of someone who'd never questioned family loyalty. Dad followed, his businessman's caution evidently satisfied by the professional presentation and cost saving. Tyler added his signature with a flourish, already imagining the Instagram posts he'd generate from his Hawaiian adventure. Cassandra hesitated, her pen hovering over the signature line as she studied my face. You know, Nat, she said slowly, I have to admit, I'm impressed. I never realized you had this kind of professional expertise. Why didn't you mention your travel industry connections before? The question carried multiple layers: acknowledgement of capabilities she'd overlooked, combined with suspicion about why I'd kept those capabilities hidden. You never asked, I replied simply, which was both true and devastating in its simplicity. In 5 years of family dinners and holiday gatherings, none of them had ever inquired about my career beyond superficial pleasantry. They'd been content to assume I was struggling financially because it made their own success feel more significant by comparison. The observation hung in the air for a moment before Cassandra signed the document, her signature smaller and more controlled than the other. With that final flourish, the trap was set. They'd voluntarily surrendered control of their dream vacation to the family member they'd consistently underestimated, and they'd done it while believing they were receiving charity rather than placing themselves at my mercy. The server arrived with our entrees as I gathered the signed documents and placed them carefully in my briefcase. The conversation shifted to lighter topics, discussions about planned activities and anticipated adventures in Hawaii. They talked about snorkeling excursions and sunset dinners, spa treatments and shopping expeditions, all of which they assumed would unfold according to their wishes and expectations. So when do we need to get you the money? Tyler asked, as he cut into his steak. And should we wire it directly or write you a check? The question was purely practical, but it reminded me that they still saw this as a financial transaction, rather than recognizing the fundamental shift in our relationship that had just occurred. Actually, I said, savoring the moment, given my new position and the partner rates I've secured, your individual contributions can be significantly reduced. Instead of splitting the remaining cost among the 4 of you, I think $1,000 each should cover the difference. The reduction was both generous and strategic, ensuring they'd feel grateful rather than resentful while establishing that I was now the primary investor in their vacation experience. The gratitude that followed was almost overwhelming. Mom reached across the table to squeeze my hand. Dad actually smiled for the first time all evening, and Tyler raised his wine glass in an impromptu toast. To Natalie, he announced, for making this dream vacation possible, and for handling all the complicated details. We're lucky to have you in the family. Only Cassandra seemed to sense that something more complex was happening beneath the surface. She watched me throughout the toast with thoughtful eyes, her marketing instincts recognizing a well-executed presentation even if she couldn't identify the underlying strategy. This is really very generous of you, Nat, she said carefully. I hope you know how much we appreciate everything you're doing for the family. The appreciation felt hollow, not because it was insincere but because it was based on such a limited understanding of what I was actually doing. They thought I was being generous with money when what I was actually being generous with was the opportunity to learn some overdue lessons about assumptions and consequence. We finished dinner with discussions about packing lists and travel insurance, mundane details that masked the careful preparation I'd been conducting for weeks. They had no idea that I'd already been in contact with every department at the Grand Palms Resort, that I'd established special arrangements for their arrival and stay, or that their vacation experience had been choreographed with the precision of a military operation. As we prepared to leave the restaurant, Cassandra pulled me aside while the others gathered their coats. Natalie, she said, her voice lower and more serious than it had been all evening, I want you to know that I realize I may have underestimated your capabilities over the years. This whole travel industry connection, the way you've handled these arrangements, it's really quite impressive. The acknowledgement should have felt satisfying, but instead it highlighted how little my family actually knew about my life and accomplishments. Cassandra was impressed by the modest professional competence I'd revealed, having no idea that she was seeing perhaps 5% of my actual industry influence and expertise. Thank you, I said simply. I'm looking forward to ensuring you all have exactly the vacation experience you deserve. The words were carefully chosen, carrying one meaning for her and another for me. She heard a promise of special treatment and personal attention. I was making a commitment to precise justice and perfectly calibrated consequences. We parted ways in the restaurant parking lot with hugs and promises to coordinate travel logistics in the coming weeks. They drove away discussing meal plans and activity schedules, their excitement palpable in the cool November air. I sat in my car for several minutes after they left, reviewing the signed documents and finalizing the mental checklist of everything that needed to happen between now and their February departure. The next morning I arrived at the office early and immediately called Caroline Zhang to confirm the final details of our arrangement. The conversation was brief and professional, two industry professionals, coordinating what she diplomatically referred to as a customized guest experience. By the end of the week, every element of my family's vacation had been carefully planned and precisely positioned. The flight arrangements were the masterstroke of the entire operation. Instead of booking them on the direct flights they'd requested, I'd secured seats on a route that required connections through San Francisco. The initial booking showed convenient departure times and reasonable layovers, but I'd maintained the ability to modify those arrangements up until 24 hours before departure. A few strategic phone calls to contacts at the airline would transform their smooth travel day into an exercise in patience and humility. The resort accommodations had been equally carefully orchestrated. Their confirmation showed the oceanfront suites they'd requested, but the actual room assignments would be determined upon arrival based on availability and sponsor preferences. I'd ensured that availability would be limited, and that my preferences would prioritize the guests who demonstrated the most appreciation for their sponsors' efforts. The spa and restaurant reservations required the most delicate coordination. Luxury resorts operate on strict booking policies, with the most desirable appointment times reserved for VIP guests and preferred partners. My family's itinerary showed confirmed reservations for prime dining slots and popular spa treatments, but those confirmations were provisional, subject to modification based on resort capacity and sponsor authorization. Each element of their vacation existed in a state of controlled uncertainty, dependent on my approval and subject to my discretion. They thought they'd received guaranteed luxury accommodations when what they'd actually received was access to experiences that could be enhanced or diminished based on their behavior and my satisfaction with their expressions of gratitude. The weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas passed in a steady rhythm of family phone calls and vacation planning discussions. Cassandra called regularly to coordinate packing lists and confirm activity schedules, each conversation revealing more of her excitement and anticipation. Tyler sent group text messages with links to snorkeling tours and restaurant reviews, building momentum for their anticipated adventures. Mom and Dad seemed quietly thrilled, their conversations peppered with references to the memories they'd create together. Through it all, I maintained my role as the helpful family member and efficient travel coordinator, confirming their arrangements while privately adjusting the underlying details. Every phone call reinforced their assumption that I was working hard to ensure their satisfaction, when what I was actually doing was ensuring their education. The final confirmation came 2 weeks before their departure date. Caroline called to review the completed arrangements, her tone professionally neutral as she outlined the experience I'd orchestrated for my family. "Everything is prepared according to your specifications," she said. "Flight modifications will be implemented tomorrow morning. Resort arrangements are confirmed and ready for activation upon guest arrival. The staff has been briefed on the special attention requirements for this particular group." Special attention requirement. The phrase made me smile as I thought about how my family would interpret the level of service they were about to receive. They expected special treatment because they believed they were my cherished family members enjoying a generous gift. They would indeed receive special treatment, just not the kind they anticipated. The morning of their departure, I woke early and checked my phone for the notification I'd been expecting. A text message from my airline contact confirmed that the flight modifications had been processed successfully. Instead of departing Portland at 10 in the morning for an early afternoon arrival in Maui, my family would be beginning a travel day that stretched well into the evening, assuming everything went according to plan. I dressed carefully for the day ahead, choosing professional attire appropriate for someone who might need to make important phone calls and coordinate complex logistics. My phone was fully charged, my contact list readily accessible, and my conscience surprisingly clear about what was about to unfold. The first call came at 7:30 in the morning, Cassandra's voice tight with confusion and rising panic. "Natalie, something's wrong with our flights," she said without preamble. "The airline just sent notification that our morning departure has been canceled due to mechanical issue. They've rebooked us on an afternoon flight with connections, but the timing is completely different from what we planned." I made sympathetic noises while pulling up the modified itinerary on my computer screen. "That's frustrating," I said, my voice carrying just the right blend of concern and professional competence. "Let me call my contacts at the airline and see what I can do to improve the situation. In the meantime, why don't you head to the airport as scheduled? Sometimes there are last-minute cancellations that can get you on standby for earlier flights." The suggestion was strategically designed to ensure they'd spend maximum time at the airport while I appeared to be working diligently on their behalf. In reality, I'd be monitoring their progress through industry tracking systems while occasionally calling with updates about my ongoing efforts to resolve their travel complications. By the time they reached Portland International Airport, their original departure gate was displaying departure information for a completely different destination, and the customer service lines were already forming as other affected passengers sought rebooking assistance. My family would spend the next several hours discovering what it felt like to be ordinary travelers dealing with airline bureaucracy without the special treatment they'd grown accustomed to expecting. The education was just beginning. The updates began trickling in around noon, each text message and phone call revealing another layer of complications in what should have been a simple travel day. Tyler's first message arrived while I was reviewing client files in my corner office, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of downtown Portland while my family struggled through airport security lines 40 miles away. "Flight delayed again," his text read, now showing 3 p.m. departure instead of 1 p.m. The gate agent says weather issues in San Francisco are backing up all West Coast connections. "This is turning into a nightmare." The frustration was evident even through the abbreviated message format, and I could picture him pacing near the departure gate with the restless energy of someone accustomed to controlling his schedule. I responded with appropriate sympathy and a promise to make some calls, then immediately contacted my airline industry connection to ensure the delays would continue exactly as planned. "How are our friends doing?" I asked when Marcus Chen appeared at my office doorway carrying his afternoon espresso and wearing the satisfied expression of someone whose careful planning was unfolding perfectly. "According to the tracking system, they're currently experiencing what customer service would call an unusually challenging travel day," I replied, turning my computer screen to show the real-time flight status update. 3 delays so far, with projected arrival in Maui pushed back to nearly midnight instead of the early afternoon they'd planned. Marcus nodded approvingly as he settled into the leather chair across from my desk. "And the resort arrangement?" His question carried the tone of someone confirming that all moving pieces remained synchronized, rather than expressing genuine concern about my family's comfort. "Caroline has everything positioned perfectly," I said, pulling up the modified booking confirmations on my secondary monitor. "They'll arrive exhausted and frustrated, expecting to check into luxury suites and begin their relaxation immediately. Instead, they'll discover that their oceanfront accommodations have been reassigned due to what the front desk will describe as unexpected maintenance issues." The beauty of the arrangement lay in its apparent legitimacy. Resort guests regularly faced room changes due to genuine maintenance problems, plumbing emergencies, or structural repairs that couldn't be postponed. My family would have no reason to suspect that their particular maintenance issue had been carefully scheduled to coincide with their arrival, or that the alternative accommodations being offered were significantly less desirable than what they'd originally booked. "Garden view rooms on the second floor," I continued, scrolling through the revised floor plans that Caroline had prepared. "Still luxury accommodations by most standards, but without the ocean views, private balconies, and premium amenities they'd been anticipating. More importantly, the garden view wing is adjacent to the resort's conference center, which will be hosting a pharmaceutical sales convention throughout their stay." Marcus raised an eyebrow at this detail, recognizing the strategic implications immediately. Conference attendees were notorious for their enthusiastic networking activities, late-night hospitality suites, and generally boisterous behavior that contrasted sharply with the serene atmosphere most resort guests expected. My family would spend their vacation listening to sales presentations and corporate parties, rather than enjoying the peaceful luxury they'd imagined. My phone buzzed with another update from the airport, This time a call from Cassandra that I let ring twice before answering with professional efficiency. Natalie speaking, I said, as if I might have been coordinating multiple crisis situations, rather than sitting comfortably in my climate-controlled office. Thank God you answered. Cassandra's voice carried the strained politeness of someone trying to maintain composure in a public setting. This situation keeps getting worse. They just announced that our San Francisco connection has been canceled entirely due to equipment problems. The airline is trying to rebook us through Los Angeles, but that means we won't get to Maui until after midnight. Assuming nothing else goes wrong. The assumption revealed how little she understood about the complex coordination required for modern air travel, or how many additional opportunities existed for things to go wrong when itineraries were modified on short notice. I'm so sorry this is happening, I said, injecting genuine concern into my voice. Let me call my contacts immediately and see if there are any alternatives. Sometimes industry connections can access inventory that doesn't show up in the regular booking system. The promise was technically accurate while being practically meaningless. I did indeed have industry connections who could access special inventory, but those connections were currently working to ensure that no such inventory would be made available to my family. Their travel day would continue to deteriorate according to carefully orchestrated logistics rather than random mechanical failures. Please, Cassandra said, her composure beginning to crack under the accumulated stress of unexpected delays and constant uncertainty. We've been looking forward to this vacation for months. Mom and Dad are already exhausted, and we haven't even left Portland yet. If there's anything you can do, any favors you can call in, we'd be incredibly grateful. The word hung in the air with particular significance, given how rarely I'd heard genuine gratitude from my family over the years. Their appreciation typically emerged only when they needed something from me, vanishing as soon as their immediate needs were satisfied. Today would test whether their gratitude could survive the kind of sustained inconvenience they'd never experienced while traveling. I understand how frustrating this must be, I said, my tone carrying the professional sympathy I'd perfected during years of handling genuinely upset clients. Travel disruptions are unfortunately part of the luxury travel experience, especially during peak season. The important thing is to stay flexible and trust that everything will work out eventually. The advice was both philosophically sound and strategically calculated to encourage acceptance of circumstances they couldn't control. I wanted them to arrive in Hawaii with depleted energy and lowered expectations, primed to appreciate whatever accommodations and amenities were ultimately provided, rather than demanding the premium experience they'd originally anticipated. After ending the call, I spent the afternoon monitoring their progress through industry tracking systems, while maintaining the appearance of conducting normal business operations. Client emails required responses, travel arrangements needed coordination, and Marcus had scheduled a meeting with potential new partners who operated luxury properties throughout the Caribbean. The routine work provided perfect cover for the occasional phone calls and text messages required to ensure my family's travel experience continued deteriorating on schedule. At 4:30, Tyler called with an update that revealed how thoroughly their day had unraveled. We finally got seats on a flight to Los Angeles, he said, his real estate agent enthusiasm completely absent from his voice. But the connection is so tight that we'll probably miss it, which means spending the night in LAX and trying again tomorrow. The airline says they can't guarantee seats on tomorrow's flights because everything is overbooked due to today's cancellations. The cascade effect was working exactly as intended. Modern airline scheduling operated on such tight margins that any significant disruption created ripple effects lasting for days. My family was discovering that their confirmed reservations and paid tickets provided remarkably little security when operational problems began multiplying, and that ordinary travelers had very limited recourse when airlines prioritized their own operational efficiency over passenger convenience. That sounds incredibly stressful, I said, reviewing the real-time passenger manifest that showed their names assigned to middle seats in different rows, ensuring they'd be separated throughout the flight. Are you able to stay together at least? Sometimes families get split up when flights are overbooked and everyone's trying to make last-minute connections. The question was designed to plant seeds of additional anxiety while appearing to demonstrate thoughtful concern for their comfort. In reality, I already knew their seat assignments would keep them apart, adding social isolation to their growing list of travel frustration. By the time they reached Hawaii, they'd be too exhausted and stressed to enjoy the luxury accommodations that awaited them, even if those accommodations had remained as originally planned. We're scattered all over the plane, Tyler confirmed, unwittingly validating my strategic plan. Mom and Dad are about 10 rows apart. Cassandra is in a middle seat near the back, and I'm somewhere up front but not in first class like we booked. The gate agent says they had to downgrade us due to equipment changes, but they'll try to restore our original seats on the connection if we make it. Equipment changes. The euphemism was airline industry code for deliberate passenger manipulation designed to maximize revenue while minimizing complaints. My contact had ensured that their premium seat assignments would be systematically downgraded throughout their journey, forcing them to experience economy class service while paying first-class prices. The contrast would be particularly jarring for travelers who'd never questioned their entitlement to special treatment. I'm going to make some calls right now, I promised, already knowing that those calls would result in sympathetic expressions of regret from airline customer service representatives who'd been briefed on the special handling requirements for my family's booking. Even if I can't fix today's problems, maybe I can ensure smoother travel for your return trip. The suggestion of potential future improvements was calculated to maintain their gratitude while establishing that their current suffering was temporary and ultimately manageable. I wanted them to believe that their travel agent sponsor was working diligently on their behalf, rather than recognizing that their travel agent sponsor had orchestrated every element of their misfortune with professional precision. Evening brought a new series of updates, each message revealing how completely their travel day had collapsed. A text from Dad, who rarely sent messages longer than a few words, arrived at 6:15 with uncharacteristic detail. Flight to LA canceled. Rebooked on red-eye departing 11 p.m. Arriving 3 a.m. Pacific time. Connection to Maui now at 6 a.m. If we make it through security fast enough. Your mother is exhausted and we haven't eaten since breakfast. This is not how we imagined starting our vacation. The comprehensive update revealed how much stress he was experiencing, given that he typically avoided any communication that required more than minimal effort. Dad's message indicated that the family patriarch was beginning to crack under pressure, which would create additional tension for the other family members who looked to him for stability and reassurance during challenging situations. I responded with another promise to investigate alternatives while privately coordinating with my airline contact to ensure their late-night departure would proceed as scheduled. The red-eye flight would deliver them to Los Angeles in the pre-dawn hours, disoriented and sleep-deprived, with barely enough time to navigate terminal changes and security screening before their connection to Hawaii. The timing was cruel but not quite impossible, maintaining the illusion that their travel plans remained viable while maximizing their physical and emotional exhaustion. How are our guests holding up? Caroline Zhang's voice carried professional curiosity when she called to confirm the resort arrangements for their eventual arrival. I trust their travel experience is providing appropriate preparation for the hospitality they'll receive upon check-in. The phrase appropriate preparation was hospitality industry euphemism for ensuring that guests arrived with sufficiently lowered expectations to appreciate whatever service level they ultimately received. Travelers who'd experienced smooth, comfortable journeys often arrived at resorts with demanding attitudes and unrealistic expectations about immediate problem resolution. Travelers who'd struggled through delayed flights and travel complications typically approached resort staff with gratitude for basic competence and efficiency. They're discovering what travel looks like for people who don't have industry connections, I replied, scrolling through the evening's accumulation of frustrated text messages and voicemail. By the time they reach the resort, they'll be grateful for any accommodation that doesn't involve sleeping in an airport terminal. Caroline laughed, the sound carrying professional appreciation for well-executed logistics rather than personal cruelty toward my family members. Perfect. The conference center situation is developing exactly as planned, The pharmaceutical group checked in this afternoon and they've already begun their evening networking activities. Quite enthusiastic bunch, very committed to building professional relationships through extended social interaction. Extended social interaction was hospitality code for loud, alcohol-fueled parties that would continue well past normal resort quiet hours. My family would spend their first night in Hawaii listening to corporate team-building exercises and sales presentation rehearsals rather than enjoying the peaceful luxury they'd anticipate. The contrast between their expectations and reality would be particularly stark given their exhausted state upon arrival. "What about restaurant reservations?" I asked, reviewing the dining modifications that Caroline had prepared for their stay. "I want to ensure they understand how much coordination and advanced planning luxury dining requires." "All handled according to your specifications," Caroline replied with professional satisfaction. Their prime dining slots have been reassigned to accommodate resort VIP guests who require immediate availability. Alternative reservations are confirmed for off-peak hours, though availability remains subject to kitchen capacity and staff scheduling constraints. The restaurant situation represented perhaps the most elegant element of my family's educational experience. Luxury resort dining operated on complex reservation systems that balanced guest preferences with operational efficiency, requiring advanced planning and flexibility that most travelers never consider. My family had assumed their confirmed reservations guaranteed access to premium dining experiences, rather than understanding that confirmed reservations could be modified based on sponsor priorities and guest behavior. Instead of enjoying sunset dinners and oceanfront breakfast service, they'd discover that their meal times had been shifted to accommodate hotel operation. Lunch at 2 in the afternoon, dinner at 9:30 in the evening. Breakfast available only during the brief window between conference group departures and housekeeping schedule requirements. The timing would disrupt their anticipated vacation rhythm while demonstrating how little control they actually possessed over their resort experience. My phone rang at 8:45 with a call from Mom, whose voice carried exhaustion and growing confusion about the day's endless complications. "Sweetie," she said, the endearment sounding forced through her fatigue, "I know you're probably doing everything you can, but this has been such a difficult day. Your father's back is bothering him from sitting in these airport chairs, and Cassandra is getting snappy with everyone because she's hungry and stressed." The family dynamics were deteriorating exactly as anticipated, with stress revealing personality traits that remained hidden during comfortable circumstances. Mom's call represented an appeal for sympathy and assistance from the family member she'd never previously acknowledged as capable of solving complex problems. The role reversal was both satisfying and slightly uncomfortable, given how completely their assumptions about family hierarchy had been overturned. "I'm so sorry you're going through this," I said, applying the customer service training that had served me well throughout my travel industry career. Unfortunately, travel disruptions tend to cascade throughout the entire system, especially during peak season when airlines have less flexibility to accommodate unexpected changes. "The important thing is that you'll all be together in Hawaii soon, and this difficult day will just be a memory." The reassurance was calculated to encourage endurance while reinforcing that their current suffering was temporary and ultimately meaningful. I wanted them to frame their travel ordeal as a shared family challenge that would strengthen their bonds rather than recognizing it as evidence of their complete dependence on systems and people they'd never bothered to understand or appreciate. "Cassandra keeps saying we should have booked through a different travel agent," Mom continued, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She thinks someone with more experience might have been able to prevent these problems or fix them faster. I told her that's not fair to you, but I have to admit I'm wondering if there's anything else that can be done." The criticism from Cassandra was predictable, representing her instinctive response to blame external factors rather than accepting that some situations exceeded individual control. More importantly, Mom's repetition of that criticism revealed growing family tension that would continue building throughout their vacation as stress accumulated and comfortable assumptions were systematically challenged. "Different travel agents can't control weather delays or mechanical problems," I replied, maintaining professional composure while privately noting that different travel agents also couldn't orchestrate the comprehensive travel disruption my family was experiencing. What matters is having someone who understands the industry well enough to navigate complications when they arise. I promise I'll continue working on improvements for the remainder of your trip. The promise was both truthful and misleading, since the improvements I'd be working on were designed to benefit my own sense of justice rather than their comfort or satisfaction. Their vacation would continue providing educational opportunities about assumptions, entitlement, and the consequences of taking family members for granted, though those lessons would be delivered through luxury resort services rather than airline customer service incompetence. The final update of the evening came at 10:30. A group text message that Tyler sent to the entire family simultaneously, finally boarding the red-eye to LA. Exhausted but grateful to be moving forward. Thanks to Natalie for all the calls and effort today. Hopefully tomorrow will be better and we can start enjoying our vacation. See everyone in Hawaii. The gratitude felt genuine but incomplete, acknowledging my efforts without recognizing the irony that their travel difficulties were directly proportional to my industry expertise. They appreciated my apparent attempts to help while remaining oblivious to the comprehensive coordination their problems had required. The misunderstanding was both amusing and slightly disturbing, highlighting how little they understood about my capabilities or the power dynamics governing their vacation experience. I spent the remainder of the evening finalizing arrangements for their Hawaii arrival, confirming with Caroline that all resort modifications were positioned for implementation upon check-in. Their room assignments, dining reservations, spa appointments, and activity bookings had all been carefully adjusted to provide exactly the vacation experience they'd earned through years of casual dismissal and financial exploitation. Marcus stopped by my office before leaving for the day, his expression carrying the satisfaction of someone whose strategic planning was proceeding flawlessly. "Tomorrow should be interesting," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. "How are you feeling about watching your plan unfold?" The question was more complex than it appeared, touching on emotional territory I'd been avoiding throughout the operational planning process. Revenge was satisfying in theory, but the reality of deliberately causing discomfort to family members carried psychological weight I hadn't fully anticipated. The professional detachment that made me effective at managing difficult clients didn't completely insulate me from personal feelings about my own relatives. "Honestly," I said, considering my response carefully, "part of me feels guilty about manipulating their vacation so extensively. They're still family regardless of how they've treated me over the years." Marcus nodded, his expression suggesting he'd expected this internal conflict and had thoughts about how to address it. "Remember why you're doing this," he said, his tone carrying the wisdom of someone who'd navigated similar situations throughout his career. "This isn't about punishment for its own sake, this is about education. They've spent years assuming you'd always be available to solve their problems while never acknowledging your capabilities or contribution. Sometimes the only way to teach people about respect is to show them what happens when that respect is withdrawn." The philosophical framework helped rationalize my actions while avoiding deeper questions about proportionality and family loyalty. Marcus was right that my family needed to understand the consequences of their assumptions, but I was beginning to wonder whether the education I'd designed was therapeutic correction or elaborate cruelty disguised as justice. "Besides," Marcus continued, "you haven't actually harmed them. Inconvenienced them, yes. Frustrated their expectations, certainly, but they're still getting a luxury vacation in Hawaii, just not exactly the luxury vacation they expected." Sometimes perspective requires contrast, and contrast requires experiencing something different from what you've always assumed you deserved. The justification was persuasive enough to quiet my lingering doubts about the ethics of my family's educational experience. They would indeed receive luxury accommodations and resort services, just not the specific luxury accommodations and resort services they'd anticipated. The difference between their expectations and reality would provide valuable lessons about gratitude, flexibility, and the importance of treating family members with genuine respect rather than casual entitlement. I left the office that evening with mixed feelings about the next phase of my family's vacation education. Tomorrow would bring their arrival in Hawaii and the beginning of their modified resort experience, where every detail had been carefully orchestrated to provide maximum learning opportunities about assumptions, gratitude, and the consequences of underestimating family members they'd taken for granted for years. The plan was elegant in its execution and potentially devastating in its emotional impact, which made me wonder whether I was teaching necessary lessons or simply proving that I could be as manipulative and calculating as the family members who'd inspired my elaborate retaliation. Either way, it was too late to change course. My family was already in the air, flying toward a vacation that would challenge every assumption they'd ever made about travel, luxury, and the quiet younger sister who'd apparently been more capable than any of them had ever imagined. The call came at 4 a.m. Hawaiian time, jolting me awake in my Portland apartment with the distinctive ringtone I'd assigned to family emergency. Cassandra's voice carried a mixture of exhaustion and bewilderment as she spoke from the lobby of the Grand Palms Resort, her words echoing slightly in what I imagined was the marble-floored luxury space she'd been anticipating for months. "Natalie, we finally made it to the hotel, but there's some kind of problem with our rooms," she said, her tone suggesting she was trying to maintain composure while dealing with yet another unexpected complication. "The front desk says our oceanfront suites have been reassigned due to emergency maintenance issues, and they're offering us garden view rooms instead." Mom is about to cry, and Dad looks like he might actually lose his temper with the staff. I sat up in bed, instantly alert despite the early hour, and reached for the notepad where I'd been tracking the timeline of their educational experience. "What kind of maintenance issue?" I asked, injecting appropriate concern into my voice while privately confirming that Caroline's coordination had proceeded exactly as planned. "Something about plumbing problems that require immediate attention," Cassandra replied, though her marketing background was clearly making her suspicious of the convenient timing. "The manager keeps apologizing and offering spa credits as compensation, but we've been traveling for nearly 18 hours, and we just want to sleep in the rooms we paid for. Can you call someone? Maybe your industry connections can help resolve this faster than regular guest services." The irony was almost overwhelming. My family was asking me to use my industry connections to fix problems that my industry connections had deliberately created, expecting me to advocate for their comfort while remaining completely unaware that their discomfort was the direct result of my advocacy for justice and accountability. "Of course," I said, already reaching for my phone to place the call that would confirm the next phase of their modified vacation experience. "Let me contact the resort management immediately. In the meantime, I'd suggest accepting the alternative accommodations for tonight and trusting that everything will be sorted out by morning. Sometimes these maintenance issues resolve faster than initially projected." The suggestion was calculated to encourage compliance while reinforcing their dependence on my problem-solving capability. I wanted them to follow my guidance without question, establishing a pattern of deference that would continue throughout their stay as they gradually discovered how completely their vacation experience depended on my ongoing approval and intervention. After ending the call, I contacted Caroline to confirm that the room reassignment had proceeded smoothly and that the pharmaceutical conference activities were positioned to provide maximum educational value throughout the night. "How did they handle the accommodation?" Caroline asked, her voice carrying professional curiosity about guest reaction management. "About as well as expected," I replied, settling back into bed while reviewing the next day's scheduled complications on my phone. Frustrated but compliant, grateful for any assistance I can provide, completely unaware that their problems require my participation rather than my resolution. Caroline's laughter carried genuine appreciation for the elegant complexity of the situation I'd orchestrated. "The conference group is planning a midnight luau in the garden courtyard," she said, her tone suggesting this detail had been carefully coordinated rather than coincidentally scheduled. "Traditional Hawaiian music, team-building activities, and enthusiastic networking that typically continues until sunrise. Your family should have an authentic cultural experience along with their introduction to resort community dynamic." The cultural experience would indeed be authentic, just not the peaceful, rejuvenating cultural experience they'd anticipated when booking their luxury vacation. Instead of falling asleep to ocean waves and tropical breezes, they'd be experiencing the vibrant energy of corporate team building and pharmaceutical sales motivation exercises, complete with amplified presentations and group participation activity. Morning brought a series of text messages that revealed how thoroughly their first night had challenged their expectations about luxury resort hospitality. Tyler's message arrived at 6:30. Barely slept due to some kind of conference party outside our window. The noise finally stopped around dawn, but now there's construction or maintenance work starting somewhere nearby. Is this normal for luxury resorts? The question demonstrated how little my family understood about resort operations and the various factors that influenced guest experience. Luxury accommodations didn't guarantee peaceful environments, especially when room assignments were strategically modified to position guests in areas where hotel operations intersected with guest services. Their education about travel realities was proceeding exactly as intended. Dad's contribution to the family group text was characteristically brief but revealing. Coffee shop closed for private function. Breakfast restaurant overbooked. Spent an hour waiting for room service that never arrived. This is not what we expected from a five-star property. The accumulation of service disruptions was clearly wearing down his patience, which would create additional stress for the other family members who relied on his stability. Mom's message arrived mid-morning with unusual detail for someone who typically avoided technology-mediated communication. The spa canceled our appointments due to equipment problems, and the pool area is restricted for some kind of corporate retreat. We're basically trapped in rooms that overlook a parking lot instead of the ocean. Cassandra is trying to sort things out with management, but they keep saying everything will be resolved soon. The phrase trapped in rooms was particularly satisfying, given how often I'd felt trapped by family expectations and financial obligations over the year. They were discovering what it felt like to have limited options and restricted access to experiences they'd assumed were guaranteed by their payment and status as resort guests. My phone rang at noon with a call from Cassandra that carried a tone I'd never heard from her before. A mixture of frustration and genuine helplessness that suggested her usual confidence had been significantly undermined by the morning's challenges. "Natalie, I need your help," she said without preamble, her voice lacking the commanding presence that typically characterized our conversations. "Of course," I replied, settling into my office chair and pulling up the resort's internal guest services portal on my computer screen. "What's the current situation?" The question was purely procedural, since I already knew exactly what situations were developing and how those situations had been carefully orchestrated to maximize their educational value. "Everything is going wrong," she said, her composure finally beginning to crack after 24 hours of accumulated frustration. "Our rooms are terrible, the resort services are completely unreliable, and the staff keeps giving us excuses instead of solutions. I've been trying to handle this myself, but I'm not getting anywhere. Can you call your contacts and explain that we're not just regular tourists? Maybe if they understand we have industry connections, they'll take our complaints more seriously." The request was both heartbreaking and infuriating, representing exactly the kind of entitled thinking that had motivated my elaborate educational intervention. Cassandra wanted me to leverage my professional relationships to secure special treatment for family members who'd never acknowledged those professional relationships or shown appreciation for my industry expertise. She assumed that my connections existed for her benefit rather than recognizing that my connections might have their own opinions about how she deserved to be treated. "I'll make some calls right away," I promised, already drafting the message that would ensure her complaints received exactly the level of attention they warrant. "In the meantime, I want you to remember that luxury resort experiences sometimes involve challenges that test guests' flexibility and patience. The most satisfied travelers are those who approach complications with grace and understanding rather than demanding immediate resolution." The advice was designed to encourage acceptance of circumstances while subtly suggesting that their attitude might be contributing to their service problem. Resort staff were trained to provide exceptional service to gracious guests, while maintaining professional standards for demanding guests, and my family's behavior was being carefully monitored and reported through the internal communication systems I'd established with Caroline. "Grace and understanding?" Cassandra repeated, her voice rising slightly. "Natalie, we paid $15,000 for this vacation. We shouldn't have to be gracious about receiving substandard service and broken promise. This is supposed to be our dream family trip, not some kind of endurance test." The entitlement in her response was precisely what I'd expected, confirming that my family's educational experience was addressing exactly the attitude problems that had motivated my intervention. They viewed their payment as purchasing guaranteed satisfaction rather than access to services that required mutual respect and reasonable expectations to function effectively. I understand your frustration, I said, applying the customer service techniques I'd perfected during years of managing genuinely difficult travel situations. Let me contact the resort management directly and see what can be done to improve your experience. Sometimes these issues resolve more quickly when industry professionals communicate directly with hotel operations staff. The phone call to Caroline that followed was brief and professional, confirming that the next phase of their educational experience would proceed as scheduled while maintaining the appearance that I was advocating energetically for their improved treatment. How would you like to handle the restaurant situation? Caroline asked, reviewing the dining modifications that had been prepared for their evening meal. Let's give them one genuinely positive experience, I said, considering the psychological impact of intermittent reinforcement compared to consistent disappointment. Secure them a prime dining reservation for tonight, excellent service, oceanfront seating, the full luxury treatment. I want them to remember what good service feels like before tomorrow's activities begin. The strategy was borrowed from behavioral psychology, where intermittent positive reinforcement created stronger emotional responses than consistent negative experience. One perfect evening would make the following disappointments feel more pointed while demonstrating that excellent service remained possible when guests earned appropriate treatment through their behavior and attitude. Understood, Caroline replied. And the snorkeling excursion they booked for tomorrow? The question carried implications about the boat trip that had been modified to provide additional learning opportunities about advanced planning and realistic expectations. Proceed as arranged, I confirmed. Weather conditions permitting. Of course, the weather conditions would indeed permit the excursion to proceed, just not to the premium snorkeling locations my family had requested. Instead, they'd experienced the standard tourist route that provided adequate underwater viewing while demonstrating the difference between basic service and the premium experiences they'd assumed their money guaranteed. The afternoon brought a surprising call from Mom, whose voice carried relief and renewed optimism about their vacation prospect. Sweetie, I wanted to thank you for whatever you did to help with our situation, she said, her tone suggesting that their evening dining experience had exceeded expectations sufficiently to restore some faith in the resort's capability. The restaurant tonight was absolutely magical, she continued. Oceanfront table, attentive service, incredible food, exactly what we'd hoped for when we planned this trip. The manager even came by to apologize personally for the previous difficulties and assure us that the remainder of our stay would meet our expectations. The positive experience was working exactly as intended, creating emotional contrast that would make future disappointments feel more significant while reinforcing their belief that my intervention could resolve problems when I chose to apply my industry influence effectively. They would credit me with fixing their vacation rather than suspecting that I'd been orchestrating their challenges from the beginning. I'm so glad things are improving, I said, reviewing the schedule of modifications that would begin implementing the following morning. Sometimes resort operations just need time to adjust to unexpected complications. The important thing is that you're finally able to relax and enjoy your family time together. The irony of encouraging relaxation while simultaneously coordinating the systematic disruption of their remaining vacation activities was not lost on me. But the conversation served important purposes in maintaining their trust while positioning me as their primary advocate and problem solver throughout their stay. Tuesday brought the snorkeling expedition that would provide perhaps the most comprehensive lesson about the gap between expectations and reality in luxury travel experiences. Tyler's group text arrived at 7 in the morning with characteristic enthusiasm. Beautiful day for snorkeling. The boat looks amazing, and the crew seems really professional. Finally feeling like this vacation is turning around. The optimism was touching and slightly guilt-inducing, given that I knew their snorkeling experience had been carefully modified to demonstrate the difference between premium excursions and standard tourist activity. Instead of visiting the pristine coral reefs and exclusive locations they'd anticipated, they'd be exploring crowded snorkeling spots that provided adequate underwater viewing, while accommodating large groups of cruise ship passengers and budget tour operators. The boat itself was indeed professional and well-maintained, but the itinerary had been adjusted to focus on convenience and efficiency rather than exclusivity and natural beauty. They would see tropical fish and coral formations, but through the lens of mass tourism rather than the intimate luxury experience they'd assumed their premium payment had secured. "Hope you all have an incredible day," I replied to the group text while privately coordinating with the excursion operator to ensure the educational elements proceeded as planned. "Don't forget to apply sunscreen regularly and stay hydrated." Sometimes the most memorable vacation experiences come from unexpected adventures. The advice about unexpected adventures was more prophetic than they could have imagined, since their snorkeling experience would indeed provide unexpected insights about tourism, customer service, and the importance of managing expectations when traveling to popular destinations that served multiple market segments simultaneously. The afternoon update came from Dad, whose message revealed how thoroughly the day had challenged their assumptions about luxury travel experiences. Snorkeling was crowded and disappointing. 30 people on a boat designed for 20, with stops at locations that looked like underwater parking lots. The crew was pleasant, but clearly focused on moving through their schedule rather than providing personalized attention. His assessment was accurate and diplomatically phrased, demonstrating the customer service skills he'd developed during decades of small business operation. More importantly, his message suggested that the educational value of their modified excursion was becoming apparent as they began to understand the difference between premium services and standard tourist offerings. Cassandra's contribution to the conversation was characteristically more direct. "This is not what we paid for. The snorkeling locations were overcrowded with tourists from cruise ships. The equipment was basic rental gear, and we spent more time traveling between sites than actually in the water. I'm going to demand a refund when we get back to the resort." The threat of demanding a refund was both predictable and ultimately meaningless, since the excursion operator had been carefully briefed on guest complaint management and would provide appropriate responses that acknowledged concerns while explaining the operational realities of marine tourism during peak season. My family would receive polite attention and nominal compensation while learning that their dissatisfaction didn't automatically translate into financial remediation. "That sounds frustrating," I replied, maintaining the supportive tone I'd established while privately appreciating how completely their expectations had been recalibrated through direct experience with tourism industry reality. Sometimes weather conditions and seasonal factors affect snorkeling experiences in ways that operators can't entirely control. The important thing is that you're all safe and still have several days to enjoy other resort activities. The emphasis on safety and remaining vacation time was calculated to encourage perspective while suggesting that their current disappointment was temporary and potentially resolvable through better planning and more realistic expectations for future activity. Wednesday morning brought the most significant development in their educational experience when Cassandra called with news that would transform their understanding of resort operations and customer service hierarchy. "Natalie, something strange happened at breakfast," she said, her voice carrying confusion rather than the anger that had characterized her previous complaints. "The restaurant manager approached our table and asked if we were related to you," she continued. When I said yes, his whole attitude changed. Suddenly, we were being offered premium seating, complimentary champagne, upgraded menu options, and personal attention from the executive chef. It was like we'd been transformed from problem guests into VIP treatment recipients. The recognition had been strategically timed to occur after they'd experienced enough standard treatment to understand the contract, while ensuring they would credit their improved service to my industry connections, rather than suspecting that their previous poor treatment had been deliberately orchestrated. The timing also positioned me as their salvation rather than their tormentor, maintaining family relationships while delivering the educational experience they needed. "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely pleased that the positive reinforcement phase was proceeding as planned. Resort management often provides special attention to guests who are connected to industry professionals, especially when those professionals have established relationships with the property. "I'm glad my connections are finally benefiting your vacation experience." The explanation was technically accurate while omitting the crucial detail that my connections had been controlling their vacation experience from the beginning rather than recently beginning to influence their treatment in positive ways. They would interpret their improved service as evidence of my advocacy rather than understanding it as carefully calibrated reward behavior designed to reinforce specific lessons about respect and appreciation. "Why didn't you mention these connections early?" Cassandra asked, her question carrying implications about my previous restraint that she couldn't fully understand. "If you had this kind of influence from the beginning, we could have avoided all the problems we experienced during the first few days." The question revealed how completely she'd missed the educational purpose of their early difficulties, assuming that my delayed intervention reflected poor planning rather than deliberate timing designed to ensure they experienced both sides of hospitality service standards. She still viewed their vacation challenges as problems to be solved rather than lessons to be learned. "I wanted you to experience the resort as regular guests first," I explained, providing a partial truth that would satisfy her curiosity while maintaining the strategic framework of their educational experience. Sometimes industry connections can create artificial treatment that doesn't reflect the property's actual service standards. This way, you've seen both what's possible and what typical guests might experience. The reasoning was sophisticated enough to appeal to her marketing background while reinforcing the message that their improved treatment was dependent on my ongoing advocacy and professional relationship. They would understand that their vacation satisfaction required my continued involvement and approval rather than taking enhanced service for granted as something they automatically deserved. The remainder of their stay proceeded smoothly, with each day bringing improved service and upgraded experiences that restored their faith in luxury travel while ensuring they understood how much coordination and industry expertise had been required to transform their initial disappointments into ultimate satisfaction. They received private beach access, exclusive dining reservations, personalized spa treatments, and activity arrangements that exceeded their original expectations. More importantly, they began expressing genuine gratitude for my efforts rather than casual acknowledgement of my contribution. Tyler's messages included detailed appreciation for specific improvements I'd coordinated. Dad started calling instead of texting, wanting to personally thank me for resolving their various challenges. Mom sent photos of their upgraded experiences with captions about how grateful they felt to have someone in the family who understood luxury travel coordination. Even Cassandra's communication shifted from demanding problem resolution to acknowledging my professional expertise and expressing appreciation for my willingness to apply that expertise on behalf of family members who had clearly underestimated my capability. Her final message of the vacation included an apology for not recognizing my industry knowledge sooner and a promise to respect my professional accomplishments more appropriately in the future. The flight home proceeded without incident, with premium seating arrangements and smooth connections that demonstrated how efficiently air travel operated when proper industry relationships were applied to ensure passenger satisfaction rather than passenger education. They arrived in Portland refreshed and grateful, talking enthusiastically about their luxury vacation experience, while crediting my intervention with transforming potential disaster into ultimate triumph. The family dinner the following Sunday felt different from any gathering we'd shared in years. Instead of casual dismissal and financial exploitation, I was treated as the family member whose professional expertise had made their dream vacation possible. They asked thoughtful questions about my career, expressed genuine interest in my travel industry accomplishments, and acknowledged capabilities they'd somehow never noticed during previous family interactions. "We owe you such a debt of gratitude," Mom said during dessert, her voice carrying emotion that felt authentic rather than performative. "Not just for the money, but for the coordination and expertise that made everything work out perfectly. We had no idea you had this kind of professional influence." The gratitude was satisfying in ways I hadn't anticipated, creating genuine warmth between us that had been missing for years while they'd taken my contributions for granted. At the same time, I felt the weight of secrets that would forever change how I viewed our family relationships, knowing that their appreciation was based on incomplete understanding of how their vacation experience had actually been coordinated. "I'm just glad everything worked out," I said, which was both true and ironic, given how much work had been required to ensure things worked out exactly as intended. Sometimes travel experiences require more coordination than people realize, especially when dealing with luxury properties during peak season. Marcus Chen had been right about the educational value of demonstrating consequences through carefully controlled experience. My family had learned to appreciate my capabilities while discovering that their assumptions about travel, service, and family dynamics had been dangerously incomplete. More importantly, they'd learned these lessons without understanding that their education had been deliberately orchestrated, preserving family relationships while ensuring future interactions would be based on respect rather than exploitation. The photo album they created from their Hawaii vacation became a treasured family artifact, filled with images of luxury accommodations, gourmet dining, and tropical adventures that exceeded their original expectations. They shared stories about their amazing resort experience with friends and colleagues, always crediting my industry connections with transforming potential problems into perfect memory. None of them ever learned that their vacation challenges had been deliberately created rather than coincidentally resolved, or that their ultimate satisfaction had been carefully engineered to teach specific lessons about gratitude, respect, and the consequences of underestimating family members they'd taken for granted for years. The secret remained between Marcus, Caroline, and myself, professional accomplices in an educational intervention that had succeeded beyond our most optimistic projections. Looking back, I realized that the most profound transformation hadn't been in my family's treatment of me, but in my own understanding of the power that came with professional expertise and industry relationships. I'd learned that respect could be taught through experience when words alone proved insufficient, and that sometimes the most loving thing you could do for family members was show them the consequences of their assumptions, rather than continuing to enable their entitled behavior. The vacation they'd demanded had indeed created the family memories they'd promised, just not in the way any of us had originally imagined. They'd learned to appreciate my contributions while I'd learned to value my own worth independently of their recognition. Most importantly, we'd all learned that family relationships required mutual respect to function effectively, and that such respect could be taught through carefully designed experiences when traditional communication proved inadequate. The $15,000 vacation had been worth every penny, not because of the luxury accommodations and gourmet dining they'd enjoyed, but because of the education they'd received about assumptions, gratitude, and the quiet younger sister who'd turned out to be far more capable than any of them had ever imagined. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.